Keanu Reeves unexpectedly stepped into a small diner in Minnesota, setting the stage for an extraordinary encounter, one that would remind everyone in the room of the power of kindness and human connection. The cheerful jingle of the diner's entrance bell rang out, cutting through the low hum of conversation and the rhythmic clatter of forks against plates. For the North Star Diner, an unassuming spot where locals came for bottomless coffee and home-style meals, this was just another slow afternoon until now. Heads lifted. Conversation stalled. A fork clinked against a plate, abandoned mid-bite. For a brief moment, time seemed to pause. There, framed against the blazing summer sun, stood Keanu Reeves. Tall, casually cool. His dark, slightly tousled hair and scruffy beard were unmistakable. He wasn't surrounded by cameras or security. Just a man stepping into a roadside diner like any other traveler passing through. He scanned the room with a calm, easygoing air, his expression mildly curious, as if he had taken a wrong turn and ended up somewhere unexpected. The realization hit the diners like a slow-building wave. One by one they recognized him. A gasp here. A hushed whisper there. A couple at the corner booth exchanged wide-eyed looks. A teenage boy nearly choked on his soda. Someone's fork slipped from their fingers and clattered onto their plate. And then, the phones came out. Some people tried to be discreet, snapping photos from behind menus. Others didn't even bother hiding their excitement, lifting their phones boldly, angling for the perfect shot. Keanu, however, seemed completely unfazed. If he noticed the quiet stir of excitement, he didn't show it. Instead, he simply looked around, spotting an empty booth by the window. Without hesitation, he strolled over, slid into the seat, and picked up the laminated menu, completely at ease. But the energy in the diner had already shifted. The easygoing rhythm of the afternoon was gone, replaced by a quiet buzz of anticipation. People whispered behind their hands, stole glances, and fidgeted in their seats, waiting to see what would happen next. Because one thing was certain. This was no longer an ordinary day at the North Star Diner. Across the room, Lena was fighting a battle that every parent knows all too well, trying to calm down a child on the verge of a full-blown meltdown. Her 5-year-old daughter, Madeline, sat in the vinyl booth, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her lower lip quivering with barely contained frustration. Dressed in a bright pink unicorn t-shirt, her curly brown hair slightly damp from the summer heat, she looked every bit the part of a child determined to let the world know just how unfair life was. Lena exhaled slowly, trying to maintain her patience. It had already been a long day, a grocery run that took twice as long as expected, a cranky child who refused to nap, and now an overtired, overstimulated little girl who wanted anything but to sit quietly and eat. "Madeline, please," Lena murmured, her voice carrying the weight of exhaustion. She reached across the table, trying to meet her daughter's gaze. "We're in public. You need to calm down." But Madeline was having none of it. Her tiny hands balled into fists, pressing against the Formica tabletop. She kicked her legs beneath the booth, making soft thuds against the cushioned seat, her nose scrunched up in pure 5-year-old defiance. "I don't want to be here," she whined, her voice rising just enough to draw the attention of nearby diners. Lena felt her cheeks flush. She could feel the silent judgment from the older couple in the next booth and the sideways glances from a group of teenagers scrolling through their phones. She knew exactly what they were thinking. Why can't she control her kid? She leaned in, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "Maddie, I need you to take a deep breath. We'll eat, and then we can go, okay?" Madeline's eyes narrowed, her little chest rising and falling with shallow, angry breaths. She was past the point of logic. The world in her mind had done her a great injustice. She hadn't gotten the toy she wanted. She wasn't allowed to have ice cream for lunch, and now her mother was expecting her to just sit there like everything was fine. Number absolutely not. A sharp, high-pitched shriek burst from her lips. Several heads turned. The sound cut through the quiet murmur of the diner like a knife. Before Lena could react, before she could reach for her daughter's hands or attempt another calming plea, Madeline made her move. With the force of a tiny but determined warrior, she grabbed her plastic cup of chocolate milk and in one swift, impulsive motion, hurled it across the table. Lena barely had time to process what was happening before the cup sailed through the air, spinning like a rogue frisbee. The lid popped off mid-flight, sending a cascade of chocolate milk spilling out in slow motion. It soared past Lena's outstretched hands, over the next table, and splash! The diner fell silent. Every eye turned to Keanu Reeves, who now sat frozen in his booth, chocolate milk dripping from the front of his shirt and pooling in his lap. The cup soared through the air, spinning wildly, an innocent casualty of a 5-year-old's frustration. It was as if the entire diner collectively held its breath, watching the impending disaster unfold in slow motion. The chocolate milk, rich and thick, arced gracefully before gravity took over, sending a cascade of liquid directly onto the last person anyone expected, Keanu Reeves. For a split second the world seemed to pause. The impact was unmistakable. The milk splattered across the front of Keanu's shirt, dark streaks soaking into the fabric, dripping down onto his jeans. Droplets splashed onto the tabletop, pooling between the salt shaker and a half-folded menu. The now empty cup bounced once against the edge of his table before rolling onto the floor, coming to a lifeless stop near his boots. And then, absolute silence. A sharp gasp rippled through the diner. Forks were abandoned. Drinks were left untouched. Even the sizzling from the kitchen seemed to hush as every single person turned to witness what might become the most talked-about moment in North Star Diner history. Keanu Reeves, international movie star, beloved internet icon, the epitome of cool, sat there, motionless. His gaze dropped from his now milk-soaked jeans to the small, stunned culprit across the room. Madeline's little hands shot up to her mouth. Her cheeks burned red as her brain struggled to process the crime she had just committed. A second ago, she had been furious. Now she was petrified. Lena's stomach dropped. "Oh my God!" The words barely escaped her lips as she scrambled for napkins, her hands shaking. "I'm so sorry." Her heart pounded. This wasn't just some random guy in a booth. This was Keanu freaking Reeves. And her daughter had just baptized him in chocolate milk. Madeline, usually loud and defiant, was now dead silent. Her wide brown eyes darted from her mother to the milk-soaked man across the room. She shrank into the booth, her tiny fingers gripping the hem of her unicorn t-shirt as if she could somehow disappear into it. Keanu still hadn't said a word. The diners barely dared to breathe. Every eye was locked on him, waiting. Would Keanu Reeves, the internet's most beloved nice guy, stay true to his reputation? Or had this moment, this sudden, unexpected dairy disaster, pushed him to his breaking point? For a moment, the entire diner braced itself. Keanu Reeves, still sitting in the same milk-soaked booth, glanced down at his chocolate-stained jeans. His brow furrowed just slightly, a flicker of something unreadable passing across his face. Was it annoyance? Frustration? Would this be the moment that shattered the internet's image of Hollywood's nicest guy? The tension in the room was so thick it could have been cut with a butter knife. Madeline, still half hidden behind the table, shrank even further, her fingers clutching the edge of her unicorn t-shirt like it was some kind of shield. Lena, napkins clenched tightly in her hands, was already mid-sprint toward the booth, her mind racing for the right words to fix this disaster. Then, just as suddenly as the moment had turned deadly serious, Keanu let out a quiet chuckle. "Well?" he said, his deep, unmistakable voice laced with amusement. "I guess someone wasn't too happy with their drink, huh?" A ripple of disbelieving laughter spread through the diner. First it was just a few nervous chuckles, then a wave of relieved giggles and snickers rolled across the room like an invisible sigh. Conversation started again. The tension melted like ice cream left in the sun. Madeline's head snapped up. She had expected anger, maybe even one of those grown-up Stearns talks that made her feel extra small, but instead the man she had just drenched in chocolate milk was smiling at her. Actually smiling. Lena stumbled forward, still holding a stack of napkins like they were a peace offering. I'm so sorry, Mr. Reeves, But Keanu waved her off, still completely unfazed. "No worries," he said, his tone so effortlessly calm it was almost ridiculous. He plucked a napkin from the pile, dabbing at his jeans with zero urgency. Then, with a slight grin, he leaned slightly toward Madeline and added, "Besides, I needed to cool off in this heat anyway." Madeline's lips twitched. Her eyes flicked between her mother, the mess she had made, and the Hollywood star sitting in front of her. Slowly, hesitantly, she giggled. Lena, still flustered, exhaled the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Crisis averted. As the laughter died down and the last few chuckles faded into the background, a new kind of curiosity settled over the diner. Sure, the chocolate milk disaster had been a spectacle in itself, but now an even bigger question lingered in the air. What on earth was Keanu Reeves doing in a tiny diner in the middle of nowhere, Minnesota? The room remained unusually quiet as the waitress, a young woman in her early 20s with a name tag that read Jenny, approached Keanu's table with a fresh stack of napkins. She fidgeted slightly, her face somewhere between apologetic and starstruck. Here, Mr. Reeves," she said, offering the napkins while visibly trying to contain her excitement. Sorry about that." Keanu gave her a warm smile as he took them. "No need to be sorry," he assured her, casually blotting at his jeans like it was just another day. Jenny hesitated for a moment before blurting out, "What brings you here?" Her voice was quiet, almost cautious, as if she still couldn't believe she was speaking to him in real life. Keanu, still dabbing at the stains, grinned. "Just passing through," he said, "taking the scenic route on my way to a filming location. My car's getting checked out at a garage down the street, so I figured I'd stop in for a bite while I wait." The answer was so normal, so regular guy casual, that it almost didn't make sense coming from him. Lena, still gripping the stack of napkins she had originally intended for damage control, let out a breath. The mortification of what had just happened still clung to her, though the warmth of Keanu's kindness had dulled its sharp edges. "I really can't apologize enough," she said, her voice still tinged with lingering embarrassment. "She's just having a rough day." Keanu shook his head gently, his expression so genuine, so easygoing that it was almost ridiculous. "Really?" he said. "It's okay. These things happen." Then, without hesitation, he gestured toward the empty seats across from him. "Would you two like to join me? I wouldn't mind the company." Lena blinked, stunned. Was he serious? This was Keanu Reeves, sitting across from him in a booth at some little diner. That wasn't normal. Are you sure?" she asked, still hesitant. "We wouldn't want to impose." "Not at all," Keanu said, his voice warm and inviting. "I'd welcome the company." For a second, Lena glanced at Madeline, still half buried in the booth. The little girl, who had moments ago been mid-tantrum, now sat completely still. Her wide brown eyes locked onto Keanu like he had just descended from the clouds. There was no way she was saying no to this. Still feeling like she might wake up from a dream at any second, Lena took a breath and slid into the booth, guiding Madeline in beside her. The little girl, her earlier frustration now completely forgotten, watched Keanu with the quiet fascination of a child trying to figure out how magic worked. As the tension fully dissolved and their unexpected meal together settled into something strangely comfortable, Keanu turned his attention to Madeline. Leaning forward slightly, elbows resting casually on the table, he gave her a small, curious smile. "So tell me," he said, his voice gentle but playful, "what was bothering you so much that it made you throw your milk?" Madeline hesitated for half a second, as if considering whether she could really trust this man, the same man she had just drenched in chocolate milk. But Keanu's expression was open and easygoing, and something about him felt safe. With a dramatic sigh, she launched into a full-fledged explanation, her little hands gesturing wildly as she spoke. "I wanted a unicorn," she declared, her voice filled with the injustice of it all. "But my mom got me a cat, and I don't like cats. And then I wanted ice cream for lunch, but she said no. And that's why today is the worst day ever." She folded her arms across her chest, a deep frown settling on her tiny face, as if daring Keanu to challenge the validity of her suffering. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully, as if she had just revealed the most profound set of problems he had ever encountered. "Wow," Keanu said, rubbing his chin in exaggerated contemplation. "That's a lot." Madeline nodded fiercely. "I mean," he continued, "a unicorn would have been pretty cool. And I get it. Ice cream for lunch? That sounds like a dream." Madeline's eyes lit up. Finally, someone understood. Lena, who had expected Keanu to maybe chuckle or brush off her daughter's complaints, watched in amazement as he engaged with her daughter like what she was saying actually mattered. Then Keanu shifted his focus to Lena, his expression warm but perceptive. "And how about you?" he asked gently. "Looks like it's been a rough day for both of you." Lena hesitated. She wasn't used to people, let alone strangers, let alone Keanu Reeves, asking her about her struggles. She considered giving a short, polite answer, but there was something about Keanu's presence, his genuine interest, that made her feel like she could actually be honest. So, for the first time in a long time, she let her guard down. She took a deep breath. "Things have been tough," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "My husband left 6 months ago. It was sudden. And well, we're still trying to figure things out." Keanu nodded, his face softening with true understanding. "That must be really difficult," he said, his voice quiet. Lena glanced at her daughter, who was now absent-mindedly tracing patterns on the table with her finger. "I know she's acting out because she's struggling too, but sometimes when she's having a meltdown in public and I feel everyone staring at me, she sighed, shaking her head. "I feel like I'm failing." For a moment, Keanu didn't speak. Then, in a voice even softer, he said, "I get that." And then he shared something Lena never expected to hear. He talked about his own experiences with loss, losing his best friend River Phoenix at such a young age, losing his partner Jennifer Syme, and their unborn daughter. "I remember feeling lost," he admitted, his gaze far away, as if revisiting the weight of that pain. "Like the world had tilted on its axis, and I couldn't find my balance." Lena swallowed hard, her eyes stinging. "That's exactly how it feels sometimes." Keanu looked at her then, his expression one of quiet understanding. "You never really get over it," he said, offering her a small, knowing smile. "You just learn to carry it." As their conversation continued, Madeline began to fidget, shifting in her seat, her small fingers tapping absent-mindedly against the edge of the table. Her earlier frustration had long since faded, but as any 5-year-old would, she was growing restless. Keanu, ever perceptive, caught on immediately. His lips curled into a playful grin as he leaned forward. "Hey, Madeline, want to go on a little adventure?" Madeline's eyes lit up, all signs of boredom instantly vanishing. "An adventure?" she echoed, her tiny voice filled with renewed excitement. Keanu stood up, brushing off the last few remnants of chocolate milk from his jeans. "Yep," he said, holding out his hand. "Come on, kiddo. Let's go explore." Lena hesitated, glancing between the two. Taking her daughter on an adventure, in the middle of a diner, with Keanu Reeves. It wasn't exactly the kind of thing she'd planned for their day, but at this point, today had already been anything but ordinary. With a small nod from Lena, Madeline eagerly grabbed Keanu's hand, and together they made their way toward the back of the diner. Keanu pushed open a side door, revealing the narrow alleyway behind the building. To most, it was just a plain stretch of pavement lined with dumpsters and stacks of old crates. But not to Keanu. "You know what this is?" he whispered, crouching slightly so he was at eye level with Madeline. The little girl shook her head, her imagination already buzzing. "This," Keanu said dramatically, "is a secret passage. Only the bravest explorers know about it." Madeline gasped, eyes widening. Her earlier tantrum was long forgotten. For the next few minutes, the unlikely pair explored the hidden world of the alley, turning mundane details into a grand adventure. Keanu encouraged her curiosity, pointing out the shapes the clouds made above them, the mystery markings on the brick walls, and even the hidden treasure, which turned out to be a shiny coin lying in a crack on the sidewalk. Lena watched from the doorway, her heart swelling as she saw her daughter giggling, running around, and simply being a kid again. Some moments stay with us forever. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to Heroic Tales USA for more incredible real-life encounters and inspiring stories.